It's not just Catherine Harris's office involved. Jeb Bush's office is directly involved. I just got this information. There was a letter dated September 18th, 6 weeks before the election, going out. If you have committed a felony, remember I said not quite 10% of the people on the list had committed felonies, right? May have committed felonies. We don't know. A lot of the people on that list, and many thousands others, were stopped from registering by an edict out of Jeb Bush's office, which said if you are a felon from another state where you've had your rights to vote restored, if you come to Florida, you lose your right to vote unless my office, and I personally give you clemency, executive clemency. Yeah, that's kind of interesting. Now, I won't say he never gave anyone clemency. Chuck Colson was given clemency. 30,000 people did apply, still waiting for an answer. But the thing is that you don't have to. If you have, before our last election, there was a law which prohibited Jeb from doing this, which is still in effect, called the U.S. Constitution. It's a clause that actually we didn't learn about with all the, it's rarely bothered with because we have a federal republic, which is called the Full Faith and Credit Clause of the U.S. Constitution. Jeb Bush can't take away your civil rights just because you happen to take a train into Florida. So if you committed a crime, you served your time. Almost every state in America says you serve your time, you get through parole, you stay clean, you're a citizen again. And that's the law of the United States of America, and that's the law of the Constitution of Florida. And that was the edict of 2 court orders against Jeb Bush's office saying you have to stop taking away people's civil rights just because they moved to Florida. 2 court orders. Before the election. I talked to someone in Jeb Bush's office. She said, don't talk to me now, talk to me before office hours. I said, do you know about the 2 court orders that this seems to violate? She said, yeah. I said, how do you know? She says, I keep them right on my desk. Every day I look at those court orders. So you following those court orders? She said, the court orders tell us to do one thing, and we do something else. I said, you violating the court orders? She said, the law tells us to do one thing, we do something else. Said, you're telling me the governor's breaking the law? She says, they tell us the court told us to do one thing, we do something else. CBS News, well, you heard that on CBS, right? Now, by the way, if you look at the list, there are almost just short of 3,000 names on this list of people who have the right to vote from other states and were removed from the voter rolls illegally. Just on that list. Thousands more denied the right to vote, the right to register in the first place. I actually took when I was in Tallahassee, I went to Leon County. I went to the voting office there. Very sophisticated group of guys, Democrats. And they had a voting machine set up, a counting machine, where most ballots in Florida, or a big hunk of them, are done by paper, which is, by the way, the best way, as we found throughout history of the last couple centuries. Paper ballots are really the safest in terms of control and safety. But these days, they're read optically. You put them into a machine, and a machine reads them, just like when you took the SAT and used the number 2 pencil and all that stuff and just search. But because of that, if you remember the SAT, you get one thing wrong, you go, oh my God, you got to erase 15 answers. So you make a mess, and then the machine screws up the reading of your test. Well, same thing in Florida. Okay. So you have all these, like Leon County and other counties, have paper ballots. So I just had a camera crew with me, and I was just fooling around, actually. I said, oh, this is cool. And they had a sample ballot, and they had it with presidential name. So I voted for Ralph Nader and Pat Buchanan. And I stuck it into the machine. This is really cool. I stuck it in the machine and went and came back. It's like just a piece of paper. Well, it's just like put it in, zick, it comes back in my hand. So I called over the clerk. I said, what's this? What's this? That's really cool. It's coming back in my hand. I said, why? I tried to get a 3. And she said, oh, well, it's supposed to because you voted for 2 candidates. So it comes back automatically. I said, that's really cool. So then I having been in Florida, I started asking, I said, do all counties have this, that have paper ballots? I said, well, they all have it. I said, do all counties use this reject mechanism? Because see, what happens in Leon County, if you make a mistake on the ballot, it comes back into your hands, and the clerk comes over and says, oh, you marked two, tells you what you did wrong. You marked two names, or used an X, or you circled a name. And in fact, in places like, some places like Gadsden, it was very funny. It said, write in candidate's name without the hyphen. And some people wrote in Al Gore, which voided their ballot. So, you know, when Catherine Harris said it was difficult, and James Baker said, how could people, you know, figure out what people meant when they voted? What do you mean the intent of the voter? I said, well, the guy wrote Al Gore. I mean, exactly how difficult is it to figure out the intent of the voter? You know, they gave you all this baloney about hanging chads. You know, that was just minor stuff in a couple counties. Because reporters, by the way, they like to go to Palm Beach and get the bikini shots. I was guilty of that. You know, I mean, I had to. I mean, in fact, if you see my BBC reports, I did a thing on European competition policies. I had bikinis in there. I will do that. If that's what it takes to get on the air, fine. But I try not to forget the rest of the story, too. Like what happens in the swamp county, which is where, and believe me, you want to know where the votes were lost? And I was surprised, I must say, why Gore's legal team didn't understand. They don't steal the votes in Miami. They don't steal in Palm Beach where you can watch it. It's in the swamps. Okay, it's in Alachua, and it's in places like Gadsden. Okay, and I looked and I said, the first thing I said was, so some counties, if you make a mistake, you get the ballot back, and in some counties, if you make a mistake, it eats the ballot and your vote is voided. And by this point, you have to understand, I asked the $64 question I always ask in Florida, what I call the Florida question. What is the race of the counties where ballots were destroyed if a voter made a mistake? And let me tell you, in Leon, they said, we've been waiting for someone to ask us. They pulled out a chart. And it just, you could see the rejection of ballots was in direct proportion to race, county by county, 67 counties. It was an exact, wonderful proportion. And you looked, the blackest county of 67 in Florida is Gadsden. Over half the people in Gadsden are black. And 1 in 8 votes was not counted, was voided. 1 in 8. The highest spoilage rate in the state. Why? It is right next to Leon County. They had the same exact paper ballot. They had the same exact vote counting machine. But the vote counting machine in Gadsden was set to eat the ballot. If you made a mistake, any mistake at all, your ballot was not counted. And in white counties like Leon, machines were set to reject the ballot. You got a new one, and you got to vote again.